Hello, welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by Dan Worth from Who Scored and Jonathan Wilson in I was going to say fancy hotel room, but I'm not sure about it. Looks a little bit bougie. Jonathan, how are you?
It's a very, very nice hotel.
Is it nice?
Yeah,
well, it's difficult to tell. The chair looks like a chair I would expect Jonathan Wilson to sit in, very masterful.
Well, yeah, no, I'm in Budapest for the Europa League final, so I am in the hotel.
Lovely, very, very nice. Dan, you okay?
Yeah, all good, despite Reading's relegation and the technical issues this morning, but we'll get there. I'm very much looking forward to this episode. So
yeah, we are. Obviously, there are no Premier League fixtures this week. The season has finished, so we're going to do a little bit of a season review, have a look at what the Who Scored algorithm has come up with for various awards, and Jonathan and myself will chip in as well. And we're going to start with the team of the season. I've just looked at mine, and I'm not really sure what I was thinking when I was doing it, but let's start with the Who Scored team of the season according to the algorithm. Who are the 11 best? Well, I suppose they're not the 11 best players. Who's the best team this season according to Who Scored?
Yeah, of course. It's in a classic 4-4-2 formation. And
obviously, 4-4-2.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect anything.
Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, so we've got Ray in goal, back four of Trippier, Pinnock, Shaw, and Luke Shaw, Saka, De Bruyne, Fernandes, and Grealish in midfield, and Kane and Haaland up top.
I mean, the algorithm says what the algorithm says, but I'm not sure Pinnock and Shaw, mind you, actually, my centre backs might come under fire, might come under question, so I better not pick on it too much, but. Is anyone close to getting in, Dan? Anyone that was very near getting in the team?
Well, a couple of omissions are Jesus and Odegaard, but if you want to look at the back line, John Stones, I think he was about 0.3 off getting in, which I'm assuming he's in your team, Dan, but we'll come on to that. No, he's not.
I'll explain why.
Yeah, fine. You've got the rationale. I actually anticipated Stones being in there, but yeah, I think he was 0.3 off Pinnock's score, so I guess you can put that down to opinion, but we're hard facts here, so he misses out.
You know what I'm going to put it down to?
Go on.
Down to that Pinnock scored on the last day of the season.
Yeah,
I reckon if he hadn't scored, he wouldn't be in that team. I think in the 85th minute on the final game of the season, he's managed to sneak himself into the team. Jonathan, have you thoughts on that 4-4-2 centric side?
I don't know why it's in a 4-4-2 to start with. I mean, nobody plays, or hardly anybody plays 4-4-2 anymore. Please change it to a 4-3-3. I know you want to stick centre forwards in because they're glamorous, but come on. So Kane has to miss out, I'm afraid. So do you want me to go through my team?
Yeah, why not?
Alisson in goal, Trippier right back, Estupiñán left back, and then City there on after. Stones and Diaz, Rodri, Gundogan, and De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Haaland, and Grealish.
Nobody else even comes close to getting in your team. It's just
the one I ummed and ahed about was Saka on the right, but I just think Bernardo Silva is. But over the last 2 or 3 months of the season, has been exceptional. I think why would you? Yeah, if you're looking at a team that will work as a given whole, why would you break up that City block of 6, which has been so devastating? Since March onwards. I mean, that's the difference between City and everybody else, is what they've done in that last 3 months. And the team has been relatively settled in that period. So I know Mahrez has played some games rather than Bernardo on the right, and I know Bernardo's played in the middle occasionally. But Gundogan's been, as he always is at the end of seasons, Gundogan's been exceptional again. I think he gives you a nice balance between Rodri and De Bruyne. So, for next season, what we could maybe do to make it harder and more interesting is to limit me to 3 or 4 per team.
We should have done that anyway. We should have done that. We should have known. I think we've been doing the show for 3 years. I should have known that we needed to limit you because you would do what you've done.
I didn't go for 11 City players. Give me some credit. And none of the first 3 were City players. I haven't gone for City fullback because they don't really play fullbacks anymore. But Walker could easily have got in there rather than Trippier.
Was Trippier in the Who Scored team as well?
He was, yeah. I think there was a couple of similarities, right? There was Trippier and Grealish and De Bruyne. Okay. And Haaland, obviously. Yeah.
So looking at my team, then there's, I can't even do the math. 1, 2. There's 3 players that have made it in every team. Only 3 that have made it in all three of our teams. So I'll read mine. Mine is, I will say, it's arguably as niche as the Who Scored side in some reason. That the algorithm in my head is obviously working in a similar way to Who. So I've gone for I'm going to justify each selection as I go through. I've gone for Leno in goal because I think Fulham, without him, I don't think they'd have been as high in the league. I think he's had a really good season. Trippier's right back. I've gone Duncan Mings as centre backs. Brighton and Villa have both achieved higher than you would have thought that they would have done. And Villa's defensive record in the second half of the season has been absolutely ridiculous. I think they've only conceded 2 in the last 7 home games, and one of them was a dodgy penalty against Harry Kane that wasn't a penalty. I put Ake at left back. I struggled with City defenders because they'd all only played around 23 games each, which I kind of felt wasn't enough. But I do think Ake has been brilliant all season. The rotation makes it difficult to put City defenders in, I think. I've then gone for Rodri and Paulinho sitting with Ødegaard as a number 10. And then I've gone front 3 of Saka, Haaland, and I've changed this morning Rashford for Grealish. So Grealish is in my team. That's my 11. Actually, as I read through that was better than I thought it was. The 2 Fulham are in there because Fulham have finished higher than you would have thought they would have done. And I don't think they'd have been anywhere near it without those 2 players, Paulinho and Leno. That's my team. I actually think my team is the best out of those 3. Not the best because obviously Jonathan's got Man City's team. So his team is the best on paper because they're all Man City's players. But I think mine's the fairest reflection of the whole season as an entirety.
What was the rationale?
Fulham finished 10th.
Stones.
Fulham finished 10th, yes. That doesn't mean but you can finish 10th and players have good. You can finish doesn't mean you can't be in the team of the season just because your team's finished 10th.
Well, I wonder if you're exaggerating the influence of those 2 for a mid-table team.
No, if Dan was to pull some of the stats up for certain metrics, Paulinho would be top of tackling metric, for example.
Tackles, yeah.
I think Paulinho would be. He's been really good for Fulham. He has been a great.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying he's not been good. I'm intrigued that finishing 10th feature so high in your mind.
And then Leno, I just think is a good keeper, kind of overlooked at Arsenal. But I think he's been a really smart pickup by Fulham. I think he's had a good season. I think he's top of something. It might be one-on-ones or something along those lines that I've seen. Leno's had a really strong season. I don't know where he was in terms of the WhoScored metrics, how high up he is as the goalkeeper. He's probably going to tell me he's like 13th now. But
yeah, I don't think he was in the top 5.
I do really like David Raya, but I just felt Brentford had maybe conceded too many goals. But then if I go by that, Fulham have probably conceded too many goals as well.
It's quite short though, isn't he, Raya? That's why I always think whenever I see him.
Good kicker, good modern day goalkeeper in terms of the kicking now. So we'll put those teams on social media and see which one gets voted as the best. Expect us all to get some strong social media abuse there with those teams. We'll move on now to the under-21 player of the season. But actually, Dan, I think from what it said in the email, it's the under-21 player of the season. It's actually the under-23s player of the season, so I don't know why we don't just call it that.
Yes, it's hard to disagree with you, but we've gone for born on or after the 1st of August 2001. So yes, it's not necessarily
the fact is that's an under-23s team of the season. I don't know why it's called the under-21s team of the season.
Well, okay, I've got my team. Call it what you want, but I'll run through it. We've got Bazunu in goal because there was very little choice otherwise. No disrespect to Bazunu.
Well, he didn't have a great season.
I think there should be quite a lot of disrespect this season. I don't think he's had a good season at all.
I think.
I mean, if you can't get in a Southampton team, which he can't, that's not a great sign.
There is no one else, though, is there? If you're doing it,
there is
no other goalkeeper. I don't think that I can think of.
No. Then we've got Rico Lewis, Bella Kotchap, Levi Colwell, and Lewis Hall in a back 4. Midfield 3 of Onana, Caicedo, and Elise, and a front 3 of Saka, Evan Ferguson, and Enciso.
Jonathan, your thoughts on that team?
It's better than the 4-4-2 you were playing before. Apparently the kids can play 4-3-3, but the seniors can't.
Which trying to change the mould at a younger age now. WhoScored have been quite rigid over the years, and now they're trying to get to the players earlier and try and change it through the youth system.
Yeah, I don't know about Enciso on the left. Whenever I've seen him this season, he's just played through the middle. He's been excellent.
He played on the left against Villa at the weekend.
Did he? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the goal he scored at Stamford Bridge might be the best goal I've seen live this season. Caicedo, I think, we've almost sort of forgotten about him as being a young player because he plays with such maturity. So I was at Old Trafford the opening weekend of the season when he was absolutely outstanding that day. And I have to say, I'd never heard of him. And I was sort of desperately going, who is this? And I assumed he was like some sort of 28-year-old they brought in and then realised he was only 19. So I think Caicedo is a phenomenal talent. And it's Brighton. I don't know how they do that. I don't know how they're able to scout kids as successfully as they are, but yeah, that's a huge thing for them, and obviously makes them money. So yeah, I'm glad to see Enciso and Caicedo there. Cole, I think, has been brilliant for Brighton. Obviously, we'll go back to Chelsea. From what I understand, Pochettino wants to keep him. With some talk of the club want to sell him, so that might be a point of friction.
They're going to have some big problems with financial fair play, aren't they? I think that's one of the main drivers that they may sell Mount.
And he would be, and as with Mount, he'd be pure profit because he's homegrown. So, but I mean, that's the sort of that's the insanity of the position they've got themselves into, where they produce young talent, they grow them through the academy, they tutor them in the Chelsea way, for want of a they obviously don't have a way in the way that Ajax do, but they sort of inculcate them in the values of the club. They develop that sort of emotional bond and attachment with the club, and then actually we've signed too many players, you're gonna have to go because we need the money for you. I mean, that's really not a healthy way of doing it. So I hope for his sake and for Chelsea's sake that he stays. But that is it shows what a good player is that he's become a sort of focus for that argument.
He's left-sided, isn't he? And they've obviously got Badiashile, who they spent a fair bit of money on, so it's kind of like the.
But Badiashile, to be fair, is really good from what I was. Yeah. But as you were saying before, in an ideal world, if you have a wealthy club with a big squad, playing players 20, 25 games a season is fine. Yeah. So, I know he's left-sided, but some left-sided players can play on the right. Maybe they play a 3 at times. I mean, Pochettino has played a 3 in the past, so maybe one of them can play in the middle. They're both young, so I don't think you want to be playing them 35 games a season. So I think it'd be very disappointing for the whole sort of structure at Chelsea, for the academy, for the development, if you end up having to sell players just to kind of cover for the nonsensical signings of the last year.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer for Chelsea. I don't think Pochettino has the right manager, because they have got some good young players. They've just got to try and move some players out of that squad, because otherwise it's just impossible to try and keep on top of that dressing room. Really, it's going to be really, really difficult. I mean, the dressing room is not big enough currently. I think that's a fact. I've read that in some news stories. So who's the overall under-21s player of the season then?
It's Saka.
Saka. I can't really argue with it. His numbers have been really good this season. Yeah. He's Arsenal's talisman, isn't he? He's their go-to man. He's probably their best player.
And had a brilliant World Cup.
Yeah, it was brilliant for England in the World Cup. It's between him and Caicedo, I think. Caicedo, like you say, he plays the game like he's a 30-year-old midfielder that's played hundreds of games. He just can do it.
I guess my argument would be, and this is not a rational argument, but we knew how good Saka was. So I sort of think young players should be, who are the players who've really sort of surprised you by how good they are this season, who
burst onto the scene,
who you knew nothing about, who suddenly have burst onto the scene. And Saka is brilliant, but I knew he was brilliant. This season just confirmed it. Whereas I knew nothing about Caicedo, and they're both really good.
Yeah, they played a couple of youngsters at Villa Park on Sunday who I've never heard of, but no doubt this time next year they'll be worth about 70 million and being linked with Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea. That's just the way Brighton work. And people forgetting their midfield as well, Brighton. This is completely off topic. They lost Mwepu at the start of the season through health. He was someone they picked up and had high hopes for coming into their midfield and negating the loss of Basuma, but they lost him at the start of the season. Well, McAllister and Caicedo, they'll probably both go in the summer. They've been a brilliant midfield pairing for Brighton all season, an exceptional football club, Brighton, and the way they do things. Let's move on now then to player of the season, Dan. And if it's the same one that got sent in the script on, I was a little bit surprised. WhoScored gone for?
Yeah, I don't think I've changed it, but we'll find out. We've gone for Kevin De Bruyne. It's a very small win, not to put him down, but his rating of 7.58 is the highest. But obviously a lot of the narrative this season has been around how impressive Haaland is, and he was 7.54, so he just misses out. But yeah, Kevin De Bruyne, it felt like a strange one when I first looked at it, because obviously had quite a poor World Cup. Well, the Belgian side had quite a poor World Cup, and I think we discussed on here actually that he came back and looked a little out of sorts, was a bit sort of miserable and kind of snapping back at Pep and things like that. But I think that was only really a small blip if you look at the grand scheme of things of the season. and he's provided well and away the most assists. I think he's had 16 assists this season, the most man of the matches according to WhoScored with 9. Scored 7 goals, so it's not too difficult to see how he's won. But yeah, maybe not quite as impressive as Haaland's 36 goals or whatever it ended up at. But yeah, he was always going to be there or thereabouts. So I was just a little surprised to see him take the crown, I suppose.
He was taken for granted a little bit because he's always top of the assist chart, and that's just what Kevin De Bruyne does. I'm not sure he's been the player of the year, but it's another good season from him. But I felt like watching him, he's not quite been at the same level as he has done in previous years. Jonathan,
I think he definitely had that dip after the World Cup, but I think the last sort of couple of months, I think he's been exceptional again. So I mean, I had him as my player of the year. I think there's also something with him that he doesn't quite look like a footballer. He sort of, because he's got that sort of red-faced sort of. He's very Belgian looking, and so when he looks knackered, he looks really knackered, and I think he maybe doesn't quite fit our sort of template of what a great footballer should look like. And I think that maybe leads to him being slightly undervalued. But you think of the game away against Madrid. You think of how often he's produced crucial things at crucial moments. I'm always skeptical of goal scorers. I think goal scorers get overpraised. Haaland has been brilliant, and maybe it's that sort of slight prejudice against goal scorers counting for me. But I would have given it to De Bruyne.
Across the whole Premier League, you give it to De Bruyne
player
of the season.
Yeah, I think so.
It's all about opinion. There's no wrong answers except for the WhoScored team of the season, but it's all subjective, isn't it? What you think? I can't look past Haaland because of the records he smashed, the amount of goals he scored, and that's what football is all about. His goals, I just think he's been ridiculous. He's a robot. He's a machine. I can't even believe he's real. But I think I have to give it Haaland because of all those goals and all those records that he's just knocked out of the way. Where's Haaland in that, Dan?
Yeah, he was second. He was 0.04 behind. Okay. So not a long way at all.
Who was the best non-Man City player?
I think it was Saka. That's something I should really have written down, but I think
which
it was Saka.
is fair enough again. I think him or Odegaard. I think, but Odegaard has had sort of patches of games recently where he's been a bit off it.
Has he got 15 goals and 15 assists? Or have I imagined that Odegaard? That's really, really good. That's strong. I may have completely made that up. I think he's definitely scored 15 goals. He's not far off in the assists either. In terms of productivity and numbers, that's pretty strong from Odegaard. He'd be up there, I think. He's
been very good, no question about it. When things start to go wrong for Arsenal, moments he's got 7 assists. There's moments in those games when, I mean, can I pretend 15 in all competitions? I don't know. Probably you can't. But yes, some of his passing second half at Liverpool, certainly West Ham. I mean, it was his error that led to the second Southampton goal, I think. He came back strong in the second half of that Southampton game, but these are minor quibbles. But that's why he's not right at the top for me.
Yeah, I'll tell you, he's a player that's been unlucky not to be mentioned in anything at all so far. His name hasn't cropped up once. Probably Bruno Guimaraes, big part of Newcastle qualifying for top 4.
I think he's
a really good.
Yeah, he has been, but I'd say he's fallen off quite badly actually the last 6 weeks or so.
You think?
Yeah, I think Newcastle as a team, I think, have looked tired about last month of the season or so, which is understandable. The squad's not as deep as the other squads up at the top of the table, and I think he was the one who really looked knackered. But yeah, first sort of 2/3, 3/4 of the season, he was exceptional.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to get a new contract as well. We move on now to manager of the season. Now to you first, Jonathan. Who's the manager of the season for you?
The jobs that managers are doing are so different that it's very hard to compare. So De Zerbi's done a brilliant job at Brighton. Clearly he has. But Guardiola, with a different budget, has done a brilliant job. And particularly if they go on to win the treble. I think you've got to say Gary O'Neill at Bournemouth has maybe done the most incredible job. Nobody expected that. Scott Parker said this is not a team that's got a chance to stay in the division. And yet they stayed up with they lost the last 4 games and still stayed up comfortably. Steve Cooper's done a great job. So
Unai Emery's done a great job.
Unai Emery's done a great job, absolutely. Yeah. Eddie Howe's done a great job. I sort of feel that there's a few of us journalists were talking about this. I can't remember which sacking it was that prompted it, but so I say that our job, the easiest bit of the job of a columnist, is to point out a manager who's not very good and point out their flaws. And it did get to a moment about 2/3 of the season where we're looking through the league, there's no bad managers. Who do we ever go at this week? Who do we sort of point the finger at this week? Now, I think as clubs have panicked and made changes, I think there are some pretty disappointing managers now back in the Premier League. But I think generally the level of management, certainly our top 2/3 of the Premier League, is extraordinary. I think Ten Hag's done I'm not saying he's been the manager of the season, but he's done a very good job this season. You're moving Ronaldo on. You can now sort of see a possible successful future for United. Even Klopp, the way that Liverpool have rallied the last 11 games of the season, that deserves credit. So you could say Sean Dyche keeping Everton up. I mean, okay, it hasn't been brilliant, but he was brought in to keep them up, and he's kept them up. So it's really hard. I think I'd be tempted to say O'Neill.
I mean, yeah, like you said, he came into a team that was down the bottom. They'd had an awful start. They'd just been hammered, not 9-0, and the manager has taught the players down. Gary O'Neill worked with those players, got morale up, found a system that worked for them, and had that mini run in the back end of the season that ended up keeping them up, where they picked up some really, really good results. It's a young coaching staff as well. They're all learning on the job. They've all got no real Premier League experience as a coaching staff. So to be safe, not even have to worry about it going into the last 4 or 5 games of the season for them, that's brilliant. A lot of people about them bottom.
Thomas Frank at Brentford, we haven't mentioned. Again, partly because he did the same thing last season, but what he's done there, Marco Silva at Fulham, they're doing incredible jobs. So I think the level of management generally in the Premier League this season has probably never been higher. We haven't mentioned Mikel Arteta.
No, I don't think you mentioned De Zerbi either.
I said he was the first one I mentioned.
You did mention him.
I mean, basically,
you just named every manager since. That's why I forgot that it was you said De Zerbi.
I think we can write off Tottenham managers. I think that's a safe thing to do.
Yeah,
we can write off Leeds managers. We can write off Southampton managers. Apart from, that is admittedly 9 managers plus Gerrard. So we can take those 10 out. Chelsea managers we can write off. Yeah.
Lampard.
Fair enough. No, there has been. I would agree with what you're saying. There's a lot of good managers that not only are they good managers. I think there's a lot of managers at the moment in the Premier League that are good fits for their club. I think that's the crucial thing. Quite often that probably isn't the case, but at the moment there's loads of managers in the Premier League that are really good fits at their clubs. Who scored? Come up with Dan.
Unsurprisingly, we've gone for Pep. Man City have been rated 6.90 overall this season. In second place is Arsenal, 6.81. Then Eddie Howe, then Ten Hag, Klopp, De Zerbi.
Is it just the league table how we work this out? Who finishes higher, it seems.
Yeah. It essentially is just the league table. I've just realised we've got Tottenham in at 7th, which I imagine is going to impress you guys with an overall rating of 6.71.
I mean, the job Steele did there for the brief time he was in charge was absolutely exceptional. So I can understand why he's in the top 7. I'm going to give it not to Pep because Man City. I always think this is how I look at things anyway. I expected Man City to probably win the league, so he hasn't overachieved what I thought. I'd give it Eddie Howe because I think maybe we had Newcastle sneaking into the top 6 at the start of the season. Maybe I would have thought that, but I would never have thought they'd have got top 4 and. They haven't spent a silly amount of money, he's still doing it with players who they bought in, like Dan Burnley, Sean Longstaff is there. He's doing it with players that were already there that were underperforming so badly under Steve Bruce. I think I'd give it to Eddie Howe, maybe probably Gary O'Neill second, and maybe De Zerbi and Emery joint third. I think that's how I'd go. I just never envisaged Newcastle would finish in the Champions League places at the start of the season, and they have, and that's really going to accelerate their progress now and open up a different market for them in the transfer market in the summer. It's really exciting times to be a Newcastle fan. We'll move on now to flop of the season, which right now I don't have an answer for. I'm hoping you two are going to guide me. Dan, what have WhoScored got?
Well, I think before I go into it, it's worth saying that we've based this on the biggest rating decrease from last season to this season. So that kind of automatically rules out, well, obviously people signed in January and things like that, which I think a lot of people, when they hear flop of the season, will probably tend to lean towards some of those players that signed this season. But yeah, our biggest rating decrease is Tottenham's Bissouma. down from 6.99 to 6.29. Obviously, a 0.7 decrease, which, he's kind of flown completely under the radar to me this season. I've not paid a lot of attention to him, but he's played over 1,000 minutes, no goals, no assists, and the rating decrease, I suppose, speaks for itself. The top 10 is littered with Tottenham and Chelsea players, but in second place is Jamie Vardy, which, has had a little bit more exposure, I suppose, as his struggles this season, but I think he's made loads of appearances as a sub, and I don't know, maybe feels a little bit unfair that he's in there. Chalobah in third, Kovacic fourth, Heung-min Son in fifth, which, was another surprise to me. We've got Conor Gallagher, Tierney, Richarlison, Tomiyasu, and Mount making up the rest of the top 10.
I think a ratings decrease is a fair way of doing it. I also think it's a good lesson for players that are potentially going to leave Brighton in the summer, because Basuma's gone from a stable, well-run club to Tottenham, and he just doesn't look anywhere near the same player. He fitted Brighton, but he just doesn't seem to fit Tottenham. But then, does anyone really fit Tottenham at the moment? Jonathan, who would you go for as flop of the season? You don't have to use the same metric.
I don't have my own averages, so I can't. But this is where we come into the problem of changing the script at the last minute, because I was going to talk about Basuma, because I thought he was a really good signing. I thought when Tottenham signed him, I thought, that's a really smart deal, and it just hasn't worked out. And maybe it will under Pochettino. Not under Pochettino, under the new manager, whoever that is. Maybe he needed that Brighton system around him. Mount, I think, has been really disappointing. Although that is at least partly conditioned by injury. But Mount's a player that I've got enormous amounts of time for, and he's done out this season. The two who aren't in that top 10, I think, have really tailed off this season, and maybe have just come back for the last sort of month or so, which maybe is why they're not in that top 10. Are Fabinho particularly, and also Virgil van Dijk. Van Dijk previously sort of seemed almost unbeatable, and then right from that opening weekend against Fulham, he just didn't look the same player. He looked a very, very vulnerable figure in that Liverpool defence, and I guess that's partly to do with the structure falling down around him. And Fabinho, that drop off from how good he was last season to how poor he was, particularly the first sort of 2/3 of this season, I think is a huge factor in Liverpool's struggles. So I was going to talk about Basuma, but let's talk about Fabinho instead.
A few of the players I would give it to have featured in Dan's top 10. I think Son's drop off has been really, really huge, but then it's just Tottenham, isn't it? It's not down to him. It just seems to be the whole club seems to have dropped off, except for Harry Kane, who somehow managed to score 30 goals in that team. I find it hard not to mention Darwin Núñez. I think he'll go on and probably be a good player for Liverpool, but I just think when you've spent £85 million on a striker, I think you just expect more than what you've seen this season. I said that in previous podcasts. A few Liverpool fans didn't like it, but I just think they've spent more on him than Man City spent on Haaland, and I look at the complete difference in the player and what they've provided, albeit Haaland's playing for a machine like City. But I do think Núñez has got room to grow, but 85 million, you've got to be putting the ball in the back of the net more. And the big chances, this is my own metric in my head, that I feel he's missed. He's missed some huge chances in games. It's almost like when he has time to think about it, he can't finish. But when he's an instinctive finish off the cuff, he's a good finisher. But if you give him any kind of time in front of goal, he doesn't score it. So although I think he'll go on and be good, I'm just not sure about him this season. I think he'd probably be a decent shout for the flop of the season. I don't know whether either of you agree. The
thing is, he did start really well. The Community Shield, he looked really sharp. It looked really good. So maybe I've been, because I was at the Southampton Liverpool game on Sunday, and Klopp was talking about this afterwards, and he was very much making the point that he didn't want to play Darwin Núñez as much as he had to early in the season, and it was because of the injuries to Jota and to Diaz that was sort of forced on him, and so you see suddenly Darwin Núñez is absorbing a lot of pressure, but he's having to learn a totally new way of playing. And so I still look. He's not had a good season. He's looked, as you say, he's looked a bit of a scattergun finisher. I think we should give him another season. I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's a little bit like with Grealish last season, moved for a huge fee, and you could see signs, but it wasn't quite as good as you'd hoped it would be for that fee. But if you signed a player assume you have him for 5 years, and your plan is the first year you integrate him, and it's the next 4 when you really get the best out of them. That obviously has been complicated by the number of injuries Liverpool had this season and the sort of general problems in that squad. So there's no way can you say Domino's had a good season, but I think to point the finger at him and say he's been the worst, I think that's probably a bit unfair.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd not heard those comments from Klopp, and in my head, I do always think you see the best of someone in the second season when they've had a year to integrate themselves. So that's interesting what you say there, because I didn't know that he felt forced to play him at the start of the season. You just assume you spent £85 million on someone, you're getting a number 9 that's ready.
There's also that all the sort of internal political stuff at Liverpool that he appears, from as far as you can tell from the outside, that Nunez was very much a Klopp signing, and that there were some reservations among some of the analysts there. So maybe Klopp feels sort of it's incumbent on him to defend him. Maybe Klopp's right. Yeah, we'll find out. But I think the defence of him makes sense.
Maybe I'm holding a grudge because he was in my fantasy football team the first week of the season and he decided to headbutt someone and get himself sent off. Maybe I'm still holding a grudge about that. Let's look at then most improved. Dan, I think the one you've given us in the script is probably fair. Is it changed?
Yeah, and it hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
It's Solly March with an increased rating of 0.79 from 6.59 to 7.38. And I think that's completely just. But the rest of the 10 is Marcus Rashford in second, Almiron in third, Joelinton, Bruno Fernandes, Matthijs Jensen, Martin Odegaard, Gabriel Martinelli, Fabian Schär, and Michael Elise.
Probably Solly March. Sometimes this happens with players where his goal record wasn't brilliant for Brighton, and then he scored once, and suddenly they go on a real hot streak and become a really reliable goal scorer. And that's what happened with Solly March, isn't it, Jonathan? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, he had that run just after the World Cup, didn't he? Where he got sort of 7 in 8 games or something like that. It's obviously to do with the way De Zerbi's playing, that he's getting into positions more, and then once you get one, I guess your confidence is there. You get on that sort of hot streak. I mean, the player I'm slightly surprised isn't there is Joe Willock, who I think has had a really, really good season, having not really sort of been a player we talked about last year. So that's why we got all this sort of Joe Willock for England bandwagon.
No, there's only one person on that bandwagon. He's not on the podcast today, but there was only one person on that bandwagon. No, bandwagon when there's one person in there.
There's definitely been Newcastle-centred talk on Willock for England. But Willock has been really, really good this season. He's another product of the Arsenal Academy, which oddly nobody ever talks about how good the Arsenal Academy is, but it does produce players consistently.
Newcastle players, a couple of Newcastle players in. I think Almiron deserves a mention for most improved because he looks a different player this season. But I think Newcastle did improve in the second half of last season. Like Joelinton, as soon as Howe came in, really was just absolutely brilliant, and he's picked up where he left off this season and been a real key cog in that Newcastle side. I think in my head it's probably out of Almiron and March, but maybe I'm being influenced by the fact that they both had mega hot streaks at one point during the season. But would you give it March as well, Jonathan?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, a player who again is now being talked about in terms of England recognition, which this time last year that would have seemed a very, very strange thing to be talking about.
Yeah, let's just have signing of the season. Then Dan, I think I know who it might be, but give us the top 10 signings of the season.
Yeah, I'm just going to give you the top 1 because that's what I've got written down.
Oh, okay, don't give us the top 10 then.
But it's no surprise. This is Erling Haaland. We already mentioned him in the team of the season. He's only just behind De Bruyne for player of the season, so it makes sense that he's the winner here with a 7.54 rating. Obviously, I don't really need to tell you the records he's broken. He scored 36 goals this season, which is just, godlike. It's incredible. He scored more goals than Wolves and Everton managed combined. It's just absolutely crazy. I think the personal opinion comes into this quite a lot, right? Because we kind of discussed it already that Haaland is just a lot of goals. But I think Isaac needs to be mentioned in here because although he's not scored as many goals as Haaland, hear me out. I think he's had more impact for Newcastle. I think Man City probably would have been where they are now, whether they signed Haaland or not, albeit maybe a few goals fewer. But I think Isaac offers something completely different for Newcastle. I'm sticking my neck on the line. I think I would probably either go for Isaac or I'll join your bandwagon and maybe put Paulinho in there.
Yeah,
but I guess
those
would be my top three: is Haaland, Isaac, and Paulinho.
I think I'll go Haaland, Paulinho, and probably Casemiro. I think he's made a huge impact on Manchester United. I don't think they're where they are without Casemiro coming into that midfield, really. Otherwise, it would have been pretty much the same style midfield that it's been for the last few years. They'd have been more reliant on McTominay and Fred. Casemiro has done things that I had never, well, no one had ever really seen him do at Real Madrid as well. He's chipped in with goals. He's putting some lovely crosses from deep at times as well. He's a threat from set pieces. I think Casemiro has made a huge, huge difference to that Manchester United midfield. Paulinho for Fulham, I've already spoken about, and obviously you have to put Haaland in as well. Jonathan, have you got anyone that you'd like to throw?
Yeah, the only two other people I'd chuck in there would be Sven Botman at Newcastle, who I think is one of the reasons why Shah's looked so good, is that Botman sort of helped sort of stabilise him. And I think Akanji's been brilliant for City.
Yeah,
totally under the radar, but can play anywhere across the back four, comfortable on the ball, seems to have worked out the system very, very quickly. So yeah, they'd be the other two, Akanji and Botman.
Yeah, I think 17 million Akanji cost, which in the modern day transfer market is pretty low. And at the time, you were like, do they need a fifth centre back, particularly? But you're right, he's come in and filled in all across the back four, and he's been a really, really good signing for them. I don't think he was that popular at Dortmund either, but he's come into Manchester City and just looked really good from the moment he set foot on the pitch. Really, so yeah, fair play to Akanji. I think
and very good at maths as well.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, he's good at maths, better at maths than me. That's absolutely.
So he's maybe got a job at Countdown in the future, which will be nice to see.
Who knows? Is it Rachel Riley still doing Countdown? I'm not sure.
I haven't watched it for years, but I assume so. Yeah.
No, mate. Yeah. Don't think it's Carol Vorderman anymore, is it? It's definitely still. I think it's definitely still Rachel Riley. I've added a new award into the script whilst we were talking. Goal of the season. Favourite goal of the season. And Ciso won match of the day, goal of the season against Manchester City. Very good goal. There's a hint of recency bias, I would say, in there with
I was going to say, and Ciso against Chelsea. I think that's the best one I've seen.
You were there, weren't you? I think if you're there, it feels different, doesn't it?
I mean, it's one that sort of is in forefront of my mind. So
yeah, I'm going to give mine to a Wolves player, which is not something I'd often do. Nunez's goal against Chelsea was my favourite goal this season. It was his first goal of the season. It was an absolute thronker, an unbelievable strike.
Oh, the volley from the back edge of the box.
Yeah,
that was at that game as well.
On the right hand side, that was a great strike from Nunes. That was a really good goal. That's my favourite goal of the season.
Was that Nunes who scored that?
Yeah, unless you're thinking of a different game. Wolves won Chelsea 0. Nunes scored.
Yeah, Frank Lampard's first game. I was there. Yeah, that was a great goal.
Absolute worldie that was. I'd have liked to have been there for that one.
I think I'd still go and see so above that, but yeah.
It's subjective, isn't it? There's no wrong answers in these things, as I've said, except for the 4-4-2 for WhoScored. That's the only wrong answer.
Is what we're saying that Frank Lampard's been incredibly unlucky because his teams keep on conceding ridiculous goals from range?
I think Frank Lampard's going to think every time Jonathan Wilson's at my game, there seems to be an absolute worldie coming from nowhere. That was in Ciso's first Brighton goal as well. It was in Nunes' first Wolves goal. That was in Ciso's first Brighton goal as well. So Frank Lampard may be a little bit of the cause to say something along those lines. Dan, have you got anything off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, it's not actually a worldie, but I loved the Haaland goal against United in the 6-3. Where he's literally saved the ball from going out for a goal kick and just stumped it in with absolutely no pullback. Really not that impressive, but I just thought that defines what Haaland is good at, just pulling a goal out of nowhere. I mean, I think they were already up by then in that crazy game. But I just absolutely love that goal.
Well, what you've given us there is your favourite Haaland moment of the season, rather than a goal.
Oh, was that not the question?
you said I think you said it twice through talking there. It's not the best goal of the season, which was the question I asked, but you decided that you wanted to just mention that moment from
I'll just answer my own questions from now on. Thanks.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
And if we can go outside the Premier League, Ahmed Diallo away at Birmingham was a great goal.
I mean, I'm all for it because it was against Birmingham. Brilliant, fantastic. more of that play.
Sorry, to be clear, his second goal away at Birmingham. First goal was. Yeah. Oh, maybe he didn't score the first one. Maybe he just set it up. Anyway, the left footer into the top corner, the classic Ahmed Diallo goal.
Yeah, we'll have more of that teams in the Championship scoring against Birmingham players. I'd like to see more of that happen. I don't think there's anything else to discuss. I think we've run through all the different awards there quite nicely.
Actually, what we're talking about, Jack Clark against Reading was better. Sorry, but you know the goal I mean.
I don't. But
lovely goal.
I'm presuming Dan.
It's about 15 passes where you see what happens when a team can't be bothered to press against a team like someone who are quite good on the ball.
They were both better than NCSOs, were they?
They produced a great emotional response in me. Yeah,
We now moved on to choosing our favourite goal from our team through the season. You've changed it as we've got to the end of the podcast. Let's call it right. I enjoyed that season review, going through a few different things. We'll put our teams on socials, and I'm sure they'll get absolutely destroyed. Thanks ever so much for watching, and thanks to the chaps for joining me as well. Subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on, and you'll know when all our videos come out. There is another one due, so there'll be an FA Cup final preview later in the week, so watch out for that. Let us know in the comments if there's anything you agree with, disagree with. Make your own votes for who you think should be in the team of the season, player of the season, and whatnot. Have a good day and stay safe.